This is Chad Peavy, and you're listening to Gifted and Grown Up, a podcast for gifted adults and the people who love them. In today's episode, I'm talking with Dr. Eric Maisel, author of Why Smart People Hurt and Redesign Your Mind. Remember, for this and all of the interviews on this podcast, I record a companion episode with my reflections, so when this one's over, make sure you check that one out too. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Eric Maisel.
Hi, Chad.
Dr. Mazel, how are you?
I'm good. Call me Eric, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. I've been looking forward to this conversation well before you said yes to doing it. So thank you.
Well, good. I'm glad I didn't disappoint you.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So we're going to be talking today about two of the more than 50 books that you have published. I've heard you say you've written at least 70. But today I want to talk about two of them, Redesign Your Mind and Why Smart People Hurt. I get the sense, Eric, right now that a lot of smart people are hurting. And a lot of smart people are really scared. And the pains that smart people experience, I think, is intensified by the current political climate and living during a time when the anti-intellectuals are in power. They are attacking institutions of higher learning. They are trying to shut down the Department of Education. They are trying to defund NPR and PBS. They're trying to pull books out of libraries that they don't like. And it's very clear to me that knowledge is under attack. And I think that smart people would look at this circumstance and say, well, if knowledge is under attack, then the knowledgeable are probably next. And so I get the sense that a lot of smart people are scared and in a lot of pain. And I've heard you talk in other interviews about identifying yourself as a resistance fighter. And I was hoping that you could share with our listeners today where that idea came from and then teach us in this moment how we resist.
Well, the latter is really hard. So let's start with the former, which is easy. That's autobiography. I was born in 1947, right after the end of the Second World War. I grew up in a mixed Irish, Italian, and Jewish neighborhood of Brooklyn. Many of the folks around me were Holocaust survivors. The idea of being a resistance fighter was in the air. It was a well-known concept in that time. And it settled in me from a very early age, 4, 5, 6, 7, those years, that was the person to be. That was the honorable way to live, was as a resistance fighter. Simultaneously, I had strong beliefs even at that age about what I thought was humbug, things that I thought were not true. I thought that religion, for instance, was a betrayal of our common humanity. And seeing the religious Jews go off to shul and the religious Catholics go off to church, respectively, on their Friday evenings and Saturdays and Sundays, I just did not understand why anybody would think that there could be a God who cared whether you ate on one set of dishes or another set of dishes, or whether you covered your head or didn't cover your head. None of that made sense to me as a young person. So I thought it was necessary to resist that even then. Even though I was in math and science in my own mind, I thought that I'd be a little physicist or astrophysicist or something like that. What I was actually reading were the existentialists and existential literature and Sartre and Camus at that early age, and had a lot of early understanding of their ideas about personal responsibility, freedom, etc. And when I was 18 years old, I enlisted in the Army. Having flunked out of Brooklyn College, I knew I was going to be drafted. So enlisting struck me as an idea. Whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, it struck me as an idea. I also was kind of sensible enough to enlist to go to Korea, because I thought if I was in Korea, I couldn't be in Vietnam at the same moment. That turned out to work. Inside the Army, I found ways to resist that were small, but meaningful. And then I also saw how to resist would come at a cost. For instance, there came a moment when I was in Korea when I had graduated to platoon sergeant. I had a platoon of my own. And one day I went up to the library. There's a little library on our compound, and I was reading about World War II again. And it struck me that there was a certain rank above which you were responsible for the war and below which you weren't. Like if you were a private in a war, you were not responsible for that war. As soon as you had some command responsibility, like being a sergeant, then you were agreeing to the war somehow. That, again, not a brilliant idea, but that was the idea that popped to my head.
Hmm.
So I marched down to the company commander's office and said, I'd like to be a private again.
How did that go
I
over?
think that exactly. He said he laughed. He was a captain.
Mm,
He laughed and he said, absolutely. All we need is a court martial. There's no
mm,
problem at all. We can get you to private. That's super easy. And I said, no, thank you.
sure.
That was not what I was prepared to do to fulfill that moment feeling of responsibility. But these are the complexities. Anybody right at this moment trying to figure out what's in their control, what isn't in their control, what
Yeah.
matters, what doesn't matter, what amounts to a meaningful effort, what doesn't amount to a meaningful effort. I don't have any easy answers for that, but I do have the enduring belief that if you aim your decisions toward the service of one person, that matters. So even if you're now stuck in a place as a human being where you can't help thousands of people or millions of people or billions of people, but you can help your neighbor or one reader or one whatever, that matters. Or
Yeah.
that can be felt to matter, whether it matters in some cosmic way, who knows?
I want to take a look at something that you wrote and why smart people hurt. You said, we must understand that we are evolved and not designed. And with that understanding comes a huge sigh of relief as we suddenly realize that we are bound to manifest shortfalls and that we will regularly dismay and disappoint ourselves. It also brings on equally huge warning sign as we recognize that neither we nor the rest of our species are adequately equipped to handle personal, communal, or species wide challenges. Talk to us more about the ideas in that as we all sit here wondering, how do I resist? How do I resist without getting exhausted? How do I resist knowing that nothing that I do is going to be enough, that I can't change it all? I can't snap my fingers as an individual and change the world. So, talk us through how you're thinking about that.
Let me first describe two paradigm shifts that I think are needed for all human beings. We're not going to get them, but we need them. One is the paradigm shift from the idea that life has a purpose to the idea of life purposes, to the idea that we get to decide what's important to us. And these are multiple things. There is no single thing that's important to us. If we're a parent, our kids matter. If we're a creative person, our novel matters. If we're a social animal, our society matters, etc. So there's that paradigm shift that instantly helps because then we have a repertoire of things to try on a given day. If we can't make progress as a helping person or as a smart person with respect to one thing, we can hold our child's hand and cross the street and go to the park. We have some other places to invest meaning, some other purposes. So that's one necessary, and it may sound simple, but it's actually a big paradigm shift for human beings to move from the idea of a purpose to life, which gets you only depression if you're trying to find it. You're not going to find it because it ain't there.
Mm.
Therefore, it's going to be a wild goose chase. So that's one paradigm shift. And the other is equally important, and that's the shift from the thousands of year old metaphor of seeking meaning to the idea of making meaning. And again, the words are easy to say and easy to hear, and yet it's hard to hear that there's no meaning to find out there, that meaning is merely a certain kind of psychological subjective experience. It's all a
Mhm.
certain feeling. Meaning's a feeling. Purpose is a choice, meaning is a feeling. What does that mean? That means is as with any feeling, joy, anger, anything, it's going to come and go. We have to start being relaxed about meaning vanishing. Since it is just a feeling, it's going to come and go like any other feeling. So now, if your day is feeling meaningless, you don't have to go into the despair place over that. What you get to say is, it'll be back.
Hmm.
It'll be back on Tuesday. Meaning will return on Tuesday. It's just around the corner. So it's a really important realization that meaning comes and goes, comma,
Almost like a mood. It's like
almost
happiness
like a
is
mood.
fleeting,
It,
sadness
you
comes
don't
and
have
goes.
language for it, but it's almost like a mood, almost like a feeling. It's an important feeling, and I'm not sure that everyone feels it. I'm not sure that
Mhm.
this, if we talk about smart people and that whole question, it may be that smart people have this added burden or whatever of experiencing meaning and therefore experiencing it leaving and vanishing.
Well, let's look at that for a second
Sure.
because in your book, you said, in Why Smart People Hurt, you said meaning is a smart person's most difficult challenge. The primary challenge that smart people must deal with is making sense of meaning.
Exactly. So yeah, let me elaborate. Let's say that you have it in you to write a novel. That's what you mean to do. That's what you want to do. That's
Hmm.
your decision. That's your happy place. That's your love, et cetera, et cetera. So you sit down and you, with some enthusiasm, start your novel. And then, as Virginia Woolf puts it, resignation sets in by day two. Oh my God, I'm writing a novel. I don't know what it's about.
I'm a hack. Absolutely. What was I thinking?
So what that means is the meaning is going to drain out of the enterprise on day two. It's not going to feel meaningful all of a sudden. And this is why it's such a problem, because if you don't understand that all that's happening is that you're engaged in process, you're engaged in the creative process, that's what you're doing. And that, of course, meaning left today because of all the reasons you just named, that you're not sure what you're doing. You don't know what happens next. You don't know how to plot a novel and this, that, and the other thing. How could meaning stay afloat in the face of all of those objections? It
Hmm.
can't. So you can have a bad day. The question is, you can have a bad 800 days. That is, if every day for the first 73 days of your novel are like that, where you don't know what you're doing and you don't like your book, and every time you reread the paragraph you just wrote, you hate it, how are you going to persist?
Hmm.
It's going to take a lot of brilliant self talking to persist. And those are the people who are successful, is that they've found some way to not even notice that meaning has left, or maybe it has remained for some reason that despite all of the difficulties and distractions and unfortunate self-talk, despite all of those things, meaning is still afloat. But it's this conversation around meaning that most smart people never have. They've never invited to have it. There's no place at the dinner table where meaning is talked about. There's no place in any school curriculum where meaning is talked about, including really, if you were an undergraduate major in philosophy, you still wouldn't hear about meaning. You'd hear about it in a certain funny way, but not in the way we're talking about it. You might hear
But
about the history of the philosophy of meaning.
where does the craving come from? I think I sense the craving. And if we're not taught about it, we're not hearing about it, where
Let
does
me
the
ask you,
craving come from?
where does joy come from? Where does anger come
When I
from?
find it, I'll let you know. Exactly
Exactly.
sure. Now I
These
can
are
get you
these are
anger. I can get you to anger pretty quickly, but I don't know.
No, that's right. We don't know. So to step sideways for a second, I have a very simple model of personality or theory of personality that I teach, that personality is made up of three parts: original personality, formed personality, and our remaining personality, available personality, our remaining freedom. We don't know anything about original personality. And psychiatry, psychology, all of those fields throw up their hands and never make mention of original personality. They don't want to look at it because they don't know what to do with it. Pediatricians know about sort of temperament tests. If you know, you can test
Mhm.
the reflexes of an infant as the infant comes out of the womb and whether it's really highly agitated or what have you. We know that stuff. We have no idea what our blueprint is or what the lifelong consequences of doing things that run counter to that blueprint will mean. We have no idea. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that you were born one standard deviation sadder than the next person. It's not a mental disorder. That's something about your original personality. It's something about what you've come into the world with. So you're going to have lifelong consequences. Or let's say it slightly differently. Let's say it's not that you came into the world sadder, but you came into the world more observant. And what you observed were things that made you sad. Then you're going to be sadder. So it may not be that you came into the world sadder, but you may have come into the world with a kind of apparatus that's going to cause you to feel more anxious or to feel sadder, more despair.
I don't think that explains things like meaning though. And what I want to think about what you said. You said, where does joy come from? Where does anger come from? I think that the distinction we could make is that something like anger, you could make me mad right now. You could evoke anger in me. You could invoke joy in me. But meaning, no one can
No,
really bring that
let
to
me
me, right?
let me push back. I don't think
Sure.
so. I could tell a joke and one person will find it funny and the other person won't. It's still the same subjective experience. I can't deliver joy to you. You have to experience it as joyful. I can
Mm,
throw the best party in the world and you could be standing in a corner upset about something. So it's similar in that sense. It's about the subjective experience and the inability to get a guarantee around any of these things,
mm.
especially around meaning, but around any of them.
I'm with you on the religion, by the way. But I think that someone listening to us that has faith would say, well, what you're talking about in terms of meaning or inspiration is God given. How do you respond to that? Or do you respond to that?
Well, I don't. I would say which God?
Mm,
I mean, there are sort of atheistic apologetics that one can pull out of a hat to
yeah.
respond,
Yeah.
but I don't. I'm not particularly moved by that. I'll tell you, there was a moment some years ago where I was in England, and a teacher at a fancy school invited me to do a lecture for the whole school on atheism. And the reason was that the British government had decided that since they were allowing so much religious education at school, that they had to allow a little counter argument. It was sort of mandated at a high level that an atheist could show up once in a while. So I was the atheist who got to show up
Lucky
at
you.
that school. Lucky me. Well, I enjoyed it, but also, I just have to say as an aside, they had this tradition at this school where at the end of the lecture, the whole school walked by you and shook your hand, all the students, and many refused to shake my hand.
Wow.
Not aggressively, but just they passed on the opportunity.
Interesting.
And they had been primed. The thing after the talk was the question and answer period where we went to some rectory or some room or some place. And they started bombarding me with the kind of question you asked about how can you know that God doesn't
Yeah.
exist or this, that. I'm not a debater. I was not good at this. This is not my thing. So they won.
Of course. Of
They
course.
won.
You shared a little bit of your background, and I don't know that, no one's coming up to me or emailing me saying, defend your atheism or anything like that. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian home, and there is always that little voice in my head. Even my family doesn't try to debate me or question me about it anymore, but there's some perverse part that still exists in me that's what if, And so
I
I
think
get,
my,
don't engage, but I don't think it's coming from anybody else. It's all coming from me. I'm trying to make sense of things.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if I were to give advice about this, it would be to embrace mystery.
That's
I
hard.
use that word.
It's
Yeah, I
hard
use
for
that
smart
word.
people to embrace mystery.
Exactly. Exactly. It flies in the face of reason and knowing. But there's a lot of not knowing. And I do embrace mystery. If you tell me something that just makes no sense to me, like there is a bearded guy who cares what I'm eating, that makes no sense to me. And that's not mysterious to me.
Yeah.
Because that's not interesting to me and
Right.
not mysterious to me. But if, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I, for some reason, remember an interaction with a friend from 30 years ago, and 7 minutes later, for the first time in 30 years, he calls.
Yes.
And these kinds of synchronicities
Yes.
happen.
Yep.
I just put that in the place of mystery. That doesn't make me go someplace to needing to posit a God. I'm just going, wow, that was really mysterious. Now on to my work.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
get that.
I think we can relax into the understanding that there's stuff we don't know.
Well, and there's stuff that we
Sabina,
don't have to know as well.
and
Like,
don't
does it really matter that 7 minutes later your friend called? Like, do you really need a dissertation or an explanation on that event to have a good life? No,
exactly. And if 1,000 physicists are debating whether the Big Bang did or didn't happen, do I care? No.
probably
I
not.
don't need to I don't need to know that either. If there's something there that is mysterious, let it be. Dark
Uh,
matter, whatever, dark energy, I don't know.
Embrace the mystery. I love it. All right,
Yep.
so I want to get to something else that you wrote. This again is from Why Smart People Hurt. You said a smart person is able to think clearly, at least some of the time. And one of the results of thinking clearly, seeing clearly, and using his brain's available power is to see through the illogic and falsities around him, which produces a grave new set of problems. Seeing clearly puts a smart person at odds with his society. One of the important consequences of this natural ability to appraise and to deconstruct is that you breed doubt in yourself. You can end up mistrusting your own thoughts, your choices, your decisions, and even your values and principles. When you are good at deconstruction, you open the door to doubt. You must be doubly alert to the fact that you are responsible for the meaning in your life, that your doubts amount to meaning leaks, drains, and even crises, and that you must use your smarts to shore up meaning using the many principles and practices of natural psychology that are available to you. I want you to talk about, and you alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think that there are two opportunity for meaning or purpose leaks that occur that drive me batshit crazy. One is I have a purpose. I've decided that purpose no longer suits me and it's time to move on, even if I don't know what that next purpose is. And so that creates this gap. And I think that that gap can be a day, a week, a year, or years. And then there's this other gap that's, as an example, getting ready for this interview. This is very meaningful to me. Prepping for the interview, probably not so meaningful. When I was finished prepping on Sunday, Monday was just a shit day because I'd done my prep. I'm waiting for you on Tuesday. And so I have
Yep.
this micro gap where I spend
Yep.
that time beating the shit out of myself. You should be doing this, 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 and this. You're not doing all of these other things. So there are these leaks, and it can very quickly turn into crises when you have these little gaps or these much bigger existential gaps. I don't know if that made any sense or if you can help
It
me
makes,
shore
makes,
this
it
up.
makes a ton of sense. There's
Okay,
just so much there to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. Let me go here and there.
sure.
So there came a time where I did some interviews with folks who were well respected in their professions. And the goal of these interviews was not X. But what happened was it came up that for each of these folks, a time came when meaning leaked out of their main enterprise in life. One woman was a nun, Mother Teresa's right hand nun, and she stopped believing in Mother Teresa, religion, and her order. That's a big leak.
Yeah.
It's a big wool. One fellow gave up tenure because he just could not tolerate teaching his classes any longer, and giving up tenure is not an easy thing to do.
Yep.
But here's the headline. To a person, it took them 5 years to move from the moment when they knew that meaning had leaked out of the enterprise to actually leaving the enterprise.
Yep.
That's a long time to be in pain.
Yep. Why do we do that?
Well, because there are consequences. There's the unsettledness of now not having tenure, and what do? Who
Yeah.
pays the bills?
Yeah.
For religious folks, it's leaving community. They often have no trouble leaving God. This is my experience of people. What reports to me of what their experience is of leaving their religion. God was easy to leave. Their
Mm-hmm.
pastor was easy to leave. Pancakes on Sunday was not so easy to leave.
Yep.
Community was not so easy to leave. So, because there are real consequences to these meaning leaks, people stay on. Not hopefully, they're not hoping that that meaning will return. That's really not what's going on. They're just not prepared to face the consequences of making the move that they know is coming.
Do
So
they
that's
know, before you go on, do they know what the next move is, or do they just
no.
know that this one is done?
Well, what they know is a hole is coming, an HOLE is coming. That's what they know is they know the difficulty is coming. They don't know the upside. All they know is the downside
Of the pain they're experiencing now.
and the pain that's coming. They're anticipating that the actual leaving of the order is not going to be fun at all. It's not going to be liberating. It's not going to be joyous. It's going to be sad and despairing and lonely and all of that. And that's another reason why they don't want to do it.
But eventually you find that they do.
They do.
Mm.
I would say to the last moment reluctantly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like hitting bottom almost in that
Yeah.
recovery language.
I like to hit bottom and roll around and bounce for a little while. Um,
Mhm.
so how do you see them once they've reluctantly given up on the thing. They're moving on. They may not
Mhm.
know what that next thing is. What do you do with that big gap, that time of searching and trying to figure out what's next?
Well, linguistically, it's a return to the things I was saying previously. That is, I would want them to identify what's important to them, not just what the loss was, but what are the multiple things important to them. In something that you said previously, you return to the singular use of the word purpose without an
Mm,
S,
mm,
inadvertently, because that's our habit. It's almost impossible for people in the beginning to get away from the word purpose as opposed to purposes. But if this person who has now left her order or left tenure can say to herself, many things are important to me. I haven't lost the only thing that mattered.
But wouldn't you
I
say that
lost
some things are more important than others? I get purposes. I'm
sure.
with you there
Well,
totally.
sure,
But like
sure. But
leaving
that's
God or leaving the church or leaving the community, that's a big freaking purpose, right?
but you're underlining the more, and I'm underlining important. Yes, that's more important than other things, but many things still are important. The word has no meaning unless it means important.
Mm,
So if you don't think that raising your kids are also important, or spending time in nature is also important, or being of service is also important, not as important as knowing God,
yeah.
but important. The word important has to have meaning here. This is what I'm selling is the idea that we have many things that are important to us, or we may have to fake it until we make it.
I want to look at something you wrote in Redesign Your Mind on this particular point. You said, we must opt for life. We must opt to live the 20 or 60 years ahead of us. This may be all we have, but it is exactly what we have. We force life to mean while we are alive and until death releases us from our responsibility to live authentically. We say, while I am alive, I can love. While I am alive, I can learn a few things. While I am alive, I can help in some ways. While I am alive, I can create. We must opt to matter because we can, and because unromantically, but utter sincerely, we must. I think about kind of bringing together the idea of purposes and meaning. And what I'm learning from you and what I'm reading from you is that there's essentially a two-step process here. That first we have to decide, that is the primary task, that we have to decide what that important thing, what is that thing that's going to give us that
For now,
psychological
for now,
experience of meaning,
if
right?
that's right.
But
For
then
now,
step two is we actually have to take a stand for it. And I've heard you say in other
that's right.
places that we have to that you're selling personal responsibility.
Don the mantle of meaning maker is one of my phrases. But yeah, that's right. We have to step up. We have to step up to the plate. We have to show up. And we have to show up 1 minute after the next. It's not showing up on Thursday.
All right.
It's
So Eric,
continually showing up.
if I decide that underwater basket weaving, that's how I derive meaning in my life is underwater basket weaving. And I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to take personal responsibility for being the best basket weaver that I can be. I
Help people
still
swim.
have in the back of my head that little voice that's saying, well, it's important because you decided it was important, but it's only important because you decided it was important. And so I
That's
find
right.
myself in this loop of, well, I can pick a thing that matters, but in the back of my head, I still know that it only matters because I picked it to matter. Help me resolve this.
Sure. Easy. Easy. Rather than having that conversation, I would want you to train yourself to have the following conversation. If I didn't also honor my needs to serve humanity, and if I didn't also honor my needs to serve my family, and if I didn't do this, that, and the other thing, basket weaving would not be sufficient. But
Say,
because,
slow down. Say that again.
okay, I'll say it that way again, then I'll say it differently.
Okay.
If I didn't honor my needs to be of service or my values to be of service, if I didn't honor my need to be responsible as a parent, then spending all this time at basket weaving would not be okay. Then that would be inauthentic. That would be acting in bad faith in my own terms.
Okay.
That'd be bad faith. That would be inauthentic. But because I have multiple life purposes and I'm honoring all of them, because I'm organizing my week around the 7 things that are important to me, basket weaving has its place. I can allow it to be a productive obsession. I can be obsessed about it as long as I'm doing all the next right things in all the other domains that are important to me. That's the conversation. You would only not have that conversation if you didn't have a conscience. I'm speaking to people who understand that they're treading in the waters of value. They're trying to figure out what's of value. If we're talking about somebody else who doesn't care about values, but just only wants ambition or whatever, that trickster archetype in world
Yeah.
literature who just wants to poison the well. If I'm talking to that person, we're not having this conversation. I just have to arrest you. I have to get you out of my life. But if I'm talking to a person who has this feeling that it's not authentic to live without value, then that person can be convinced to put basket weaving in its place and let it have a place.
Maybe where I'm getting tripped up is conflating basket weaving with my whole identity.
Exactly. There you go. Let me bandy about a phrase that I try to sell to all clients. It's a simple idea. So even though we have multiple life purposes, in my view, or ought to have
Mhm.
multiple life purposes, in my view, that doesn't mean we can't extract from those many life purposes a life purpose statement that stands for the essence of all those life purposes.
Mhm.
And mine for myself is do the next right thing. If a person really buys that do the next right thing energy, then they will know when basket weaving is the next right thing and when it isn't. And the next right thing might be a nap. It doesn't mean it needs to be something moral or value driven. It's just the next appropriate thing based on my sort of complete understanding of how I want to represent myself as a human being.
I think that the reason that I'm making this so hard, and I would imagine a lot of people listening to this make this so hard, is because you're asking us to take the simple, like the next right thing is to watch Netflix and chill. And also, the next right thing is to write that next great work. And so you've got the
That's right.
big and the minuscule, and you're asking us to bring those two together in a holistic way. And that is really
Yep.
freaking hard. That's really
Yes.
hard.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why so many people are so troubled because the central task they're facing, which is the task we're describing, is hard. Just put a period there. It's hard. I have a new book coming out called Brave New Mind, coming out in December, in which I try to tackle how to organize one's thinking to be equal to this hard problem.
Mm.
In philosophy or in consciousness studies, consciousness is called the hard problem. Well, living is the hard problem, or living this way is the hard problem.
When I think about that, and when I hear you talk about that, it goes back to what you said very early in our conversation about the idea of process, that we are constantly in process. How have you learned in the creative process to allow for the messy and the mundane?
I never had a problem with it, which is one of those lucky things. That's just luck.
Okay.
Uh,
For us
I
mere
remember
mortals, what have you seen work?
exactly, but I'll just tell an anecdote. I was working on a screenplay with a fellow, and I'm guessing it was pizza. We're having some messy food while we were working on the screenplay. And it was my style in those days to just wipe my hands on my shirt. I just could not be bothered to find a napkin because I was busy thinking about the screenplay.
Yeah.
His comment was, I'm so not you. I have to stop everything and find the napkin. And this was not my response, but my response now would be if you stop everything to find the napkin, you're not
Mhm.
working on the screenplay. Here's what I would say. We are trained to do the next right thing or to do right things all day long, do correct things, let's say. To do correct things, drive on the correct side of the road, pick up our kids at 3. That's what we're trained to do. And that sounds responsible and that sounds correct. We should do that. Now, a moment is supposed to come in that day of doing everything right where suddenly we have permission to make mistakes and messes. That's not easy to go from one place to the other. It's really super hard because we are so trained to pick up our kids at 3 and find the napkin so we're not making a mess and doing one thing after another like that. What I try to sell clients on is the idea of, I'm using my hands here, the idea of a ceremonial bridge, the idea of having a mechanism, knowing what you're going to do to get yourself from everyday mind to the creative mind. And the ceremonial bridge that I like to teach the most is a simple one of using a deep breath, 3 or 4 seconds on the inhale, 3 or 4 seconds on the exhale, as a container for a useful thought. And the useful thought is I'm completely on the inhale, stopping on the exhale. I'm completely stopping, meaning not what it sounds like, that I'm completely stopping rushing. That's what it sounds like. But what it intends to mean is I'm completely stopping my need to get things right. That's so hard.
It's very hard. It's why we edit while we write.
I don't need to get things right. I'm not attached to outcomes. I can write a book for 2 years, and if it doesn't work, I'm on to the next book. I don't care.
I do not relate to the idea that I can spend 2 years on a book, and if it doesn't get published, who cares? I cannot relate to you on that level. How do you know when you've got a
But
good
you
idea?
know that you have to, though. You do know that you have to
I'd
get
rather
there.
torture
Yeah.
myself. I much prefer the pain. How do you know when you have a good idea versus I've got a book?
Oh, there are two contradictory answers.
Okay.
One is you don't know, and you can't have a guarantee, and you can only know by trying. And I think we get a tingle down the spine about its rightness or wrongness, or maybe its legs, not about it being right or wrong, because it probably is a good idea. If I had it, it's a good idea because it's
Of
my idea.
course.
It's got to be the idea. But does it have book length legs? That's a separate question. And I
Okay.
think I have good radar about that feeling. Could be wrong. I'm not saying I'm right, but I just have some somatic physiological reaction to the
Mm.
idea as it being worth not 2 years, because it doesn't take me 2 years. Is it worth 6 months or is it not worth 6 months? So both things are true simultaneously. I can't know, and I know I can't know. And I think I know at some level whether it's worth the 6 months or not,
Well,
whether
it sounds like
we're
there's an
alive or
element of
not.
that. Like, am I willing to give this idea 6 months of my attention?
I would know at 10,000 words for sure,
Yeah.
meaning 2 weeks. I can invest a couple of weeks in knowing. And by the way, I can have a very good idea and not have permission to follow that idea. It is much harder for me, being known for nonfiction, to get fiction published. That's a publishing issue. So if an interesting idea for a novel arises in me, I have to factor in that it's going to be harder to sell it. It's going to be harder for it to have a life than a nonfiction book would have. So I'm factoring in reality testing while also trying to dream big and be creative and all of that. I'm factoring in reality. Now, I wouldn't say I factored in reality when I was 23. I
Mm.
just wanted to go where I wanted to go. But now I'm more measured and more strategic in all of those words just because.
When I read your work, I think that, in my humble opinion, what you do so well is that you hold up a mirror for so many of us to see ourselves in your work. And I'm grateful for that. And beyond that mirror, I think that just the way that you're living your life can be a role model for us because you have clearly found a way to channel your gifts. I mentioned it earlier. I've read somewhere that or heard somewhere that you had written 70 books, published over 50. How are you so prolific?
As Obama would say, it's just arithmetic. I mean, 500 words a day is 50,000 words in 100 days, which is a book. So I don't think that any writer really doesn't believe that he or she can't produce 500 words. It's more that they're not writing, they're not showing up, or that they're tearing apart their 500 words so it becomes 30 words, or this or that. It's really very straightforward. If you imagine someone producing 2 pages a day, if this is their life work, writing, they should be able to produce 2 pages a day that they like or that stands their scrutiny, and that becomes a book every half year, 2 books a year, 60 books over 30 years. It just becomes that. It's about the consistency of daily practice. I have a whole book on that, The Power of Daily Practice. I really believe in daily practice when it comes to those things one claims to love or
Hmm.
that one claims are meaningful. It does not work for me for you to say, my writing is meaningful, I just don't get to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me as a sentence,
Yeah.
you know? And what I really try to remind clients, remind human beings is that the second you miss 3 days of writing, 6 months vanish. That's what happens. What I mean is the problem is not losing a day here or there. That's not a big deal.
Mm.
The big deal is as soon as you lose contact with the work, life intervenes and a whole year vanishes, and you didn't spend any time on your novel for that whole year. It's
Mm.
the way in which time vanishes when you lose contact with the work. That's why staying in contact with the work in a daily way is so very important. Also, let me go on a tiny tangent here, but
Yeah.
it's one of my pet places. Creative people just don't understand the extent to which they are wasting their sleep thinking by not turning to their creative work first thing each day.
Yeah. I've
They're
heard you talk
wasting
about this. Yeah, go there.
it's just such a shame. Everybody knows about dreaming since Freud wrote Interpretation of Dreams in 1899. We've been perseverating, obsessing about dreams. But that's only one of the things that our brain does while we sleep. It also thinks. And if you wake up a person while they're thinking, you will notice that they're writing poetry or solving math, but they're thinking. They're doing actual thinking. But whatever they're thinking about vanishes if, when they wake up, they turn to the new day. The second they turn to what should I have for breakfast, all that sleep thinking vanishes. So there's a very simple procedure, which is to go to bed with a sleep thinking prompt,
Hmm.
what I call a wonder, rather than a worry. People are going to bed worried about things, as we know. So rather than going to bed with that worry about what's tomorrow bringing or what's my pension look like or any of that, wonder inside your work, meaning, I wonder what Mary wants to say to John in chapter 3.
Hmm.
I really am curious about their conversation. Really, I wonder. Your brain will work on that. If you wake up and go directly to your computer, you can just take dictation. The conversation between Mary and John will be there. That's a free 1,000 words. Free. Those are free books just by doing this.
How do you balance input and output? Are you reading other people's things? Are you reading academic journals? How are you balancing input versus output?
My reading is pretty much strategic nowadays, meaning the following. We haven't talked about this at all, but I created and I'm the lead editor for the Ethics International Press Critical Psychology and Critical Psychiatry series.
That's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. And as the lead editor, I propose books to the publisher. We've had 6 books come out so far, and I solicit chapters and then I edit, and then I read those chapters and edit them. That's primarily the reading that I do nowadays because that's
Mm.
work. I mean, that takes time. And
Has
so
it
right
always been
now,
that way? Like through your career, have you been very selective and strategic about the reading?
well, no, all my life, no. I mean, I was one of those avid, omnivorous readers growing up. The more I wrote, the less I read. I think that's true of a lot of writers. And it's not that we are worried about being influenced by somebody else's style or any of that. I think it was Winston Churchill who said, "When I want to read a good book, I write it."
Mm,
I think it's more of that kind of energy of like I just in my own thing, doing my own thing. And I know I'm missing out on some beautiful things, no doubt, but still, in a life, there is only so much time and
right.
multiple life purposes and different things. And for the last, I don't know how many years, I've been editing books like not just for the Ethics International Press, but for other enterprises. So reading those chapters really kind of amounts to the only reading I do. If I try to pick up a Robert Parker now, a Spencer novel, I can't quite do it. I don't have a taste for it anymore.
So a lot of your writing now is mostly nonfiction. Is that right?
It is 96, 93 and 2/3%
Okay, that's
nonfiction.
very precise. So
Yes.
do you ever think do you ever think about do you ever think about what if I'm wrong? So once you put it out there, it's in print. You've given this advice. You've given people a direction. Do you ever think or doubt or say, God, what I said to people 10 years ago may not hold water today? Have you ever had that experience? Do you ever think about that?
Oh, ever. You're using such a big word, ever. Not generally, but ever for sure. In
Okay.
fact, that passage you read that you had up on the screen way back when, which talked about natural psychology,
Yeah.
well, I can't stand behind natural psychology any longer as a phrase.
Mm,
There's a long backstory there, but I'll tell a piece of the backstory just because it's interesting.
sure.
So I've been trying to find different ways to give a coherent name to the stuff I do, as people want to do. And I liked natural psychology as a way to call the thing I was doing. And so I get simultaneously an email and a registered letter from the American Psychological Association saying you must cease and desist using the phrase natural psychology. We own the word psychology.
Okay.
That should be a little startling, but that's how institutionalized professionalism works.
Yeah.
And so they gave me the opportunity of going to trial or being sued or removing the phrase from cyberspace. If you think about what that task is,
Hmm.
remove a phrase from cyberspace, it can't be done,
Yeah.
really. What you can do is go to websites that have used the phrase and beg them to take it down. Crazy enterprise. But I had a good friend, have a good friend who's a federal prosecutor, and I called him up and I said, "Here's what's going on. Should I fight this or what should I do?" And he said, "In trial you'll win, but you'll have a horrible time. So
Yeah.
acquiesce."
Yeah.
So ever do I ever have second thoughts? Sure, but also I want to say one other thing. I
Yeah.
want to say one other thing, especially when I'm a little concerned that I may have stepped over some edge with a book, but also for all books, I pass all the things I do by my wife, and she has final editorial control. To give you an example, I wrote a mystery a long time ago, which I liked, but I kind of felt like it was off somehow. I couldn't identify why, but I had the feeling that I'd better not put this out into the world, better not search for a publisher without double checking with my wife. And she read it and she said, it's crueler than you are. You can't publish this.
Mm.
And I didn't. It's in a drawer somewhere. So there were opportunities from my point of view to make mistakes
Yeah.
and put stuff out there that I wished I hadn't. But so far, I've stopped them from appearing before they've appeared.
Wow. You're fortunate to have her and have her looking out um,
That's
for the
right.
brand. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I had a therapist once. This was after my second book, Breaking Untangle, had come out. And I was still in therapy. And in my book, I talk about mindset methods and growing up a gay kid in rural Arkansas and the things that you have to survive and overcome, and then how I've come to think about it and emerged from it. But obviously, I mean, maybe not obviously to this therapist, but I was still dealing with the haunts of all sorts of stuff. And he said, I'd really like to read your book. So I took him a copy of my book.
Mm.
Several weeks
That
go by.
that's not actually really cool, is it?
Well, it's very awkward walking into your therapist office and your book sitting there. It's more awkward when your therapist quotes you when you're telling them something.
No, that's actually a dual relationship no-no to ask to read that book, I think.
Well, the reason I'm asking you
Yep.
is he says to me one day, he says, "Well, you were either a fraud when you wrote the book or you're a fraud now." And from that book, I would go out and do corporate speaking gigs and I would talk about it. And even as I'm talking in these gigs, I am having to put myself back in the mindset of the me that wrote, experienced that stuff 10 years ago or longer ago and realizing, oh, I've evolved past this.
Sure, sure.
How do you look at your work and your creative output and give yourself permission in the moment to be true to what is right now, but also knowing I'm going to evolve past this?
We're back to process, aren't we? How
Yeah.
could it not be a process that a 23-year-old writing about meaning may not know what a 78-year-old might know about meaning?
Yeah.
A a 23-year-old might write a brilliant novel because that's available. F. Scott Fitzgerald or somebody might write a brilliant novel at 19 or 23 or what have you. Would they be brilliant about meaning or purpose? I doubt it. And one would expect that it would take a lifetime of experience and learning to get to it and different places. Let me give you probably a good example of what doesn't bother me. Maybe it should bother me or would bother someone else, but I had a series of really reasonably successful books with Jeremy Tarcher back in the early 90s. I'd done a book called Fearless Creating and then Affirmations for Artists and then something else and something else. And then I got carte blanche to do a book about anything. Jeremy Tarcher, who was a human being, and his executive editor, whose name I can't remember, said, "Eric, write a book about anything. Doesn't have to be about creativity. You've now done 3 or 4 interesting creativity books in a row. Carte blanche." Mistake on their
Yeah.
part. But so I wrote this grotesque book about meaning, could not have done more wrong thinking things than it did. And so I remember having Jeremy Tarcher and the executive editor were coming through San Francisco where I lived for some reason. And so we had drinks at the Top of the Mark, which is a hotel in San Francisco. And of course, their first question, which they thought was just a pro forma question, was, "How's the book going?" I knew it was terrible. And I said, "It's going so well. You're just going to love it. Just great. Couldn't be better." So when, of course, I had to turn it in at some point, and they kind of apologetically said, "This is a complete mess and it's unpublishable." Didn't phase me for what worried me was that I ruined a relationship, not that I messed a book up.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew I was doing that all the way through it, so there was no surprise there.
Mhm.
But that didn't bother me because I knew in the back of my mind, I wasn't, the material in this book was not really available to me yet. I knew that it would be available to me one day, but it was not available in that moment.
So should a
The only thing I was
23-year-old be
worried.
writing about meaning? Is there a
Say
place
again.
for them to express them like you said?
Oh, sure. Sure, they
Okay.
may be a really advanced 23-year. No, no, the proof's in the pudding. If it works, it works. People have an impulse around something. Like they really want, and what comes up for me is I'm now editing contributions in the existential wellness book that I just mentioned. So I'm
Mhm.
getting books about sort of the history of existentialism and different phenomenology and all the stuff that existentialists write about. And all of these authors have a reason for writing what they're writing. They have an impulse, they have values invested. The results just are not very clear or compelling, pretty much, which I have to say to them and send it back to them with commentary. So these are professors of whatever in prestigious universities, and they still can't say this stuff well.
Mm.
So the proof is in the pudding. Some 23-year-old might say it beautifully, and this 68-year-old professor still can't say it well.
Yeah.
So it's not about age or experience or whatever. It's whatever it is.
I find a lot of permission in that. I'm really glad you shared that experience. Yeah. I felt a lot of permission in that.
Oh, good. And by the way, just to remind ourselves about something, creative folks are very easygoing with respect to other people's work. They read an ordinary novel, they'll go, "It was fine." They don't
Yes.
gonna bash that novel. They'll go, that got me through a summer afternoon. That was just fine." Their own ordinary work? No, not okay.
Yeah.
Being ordinary themselves is not okay. It's perfectly fine for someone else. They don't get the idea of a body of work. They really, most creative folks do not get this idea that they're creating a body of work, some of which will be ordinary, some of which will be miserable, some of which will be excellent, that there's a range in this body of work. They don't get this idea of a body of work. They're so invested in the thing they're looking at and needing it to be marvelous that they forget the long game. And the long game is lots of stuff that's ordinary. Who wants
I,
to hear that? But that's the truth about process.
nobody wants to hear that. And that brings me to something that you wrote in Why Smart People Hurt. You said getting a grip on your own mind is part of the process of stopping unreasonable self pestering. But just as important is getting a grip on what is actually important to you. If you don't know what the big stuff is, it will naturally be that much more difficult not to sweat the small stuff. Small stuff looms large when the big stuff is unknown. If you currently don't know what's important to you, please decide. The task is in deciding. To your point, I find myself self pestering a lot.
Let me say to you as a
Mm,
person, if I were coaching you, I would be wondering what your big project is that you're not doing. That would
mm.
be because I know that you're a big project person. A big project person who's not working on a big project is going to feel a meaning shortfall and pester themselves about what they're doing. It doesn't mean that if they are working on their big project, that's a guarantee, but there's a hole there. And I'm not inviting you to say what your big project is that you're not working on, but I would just know that there is one.
Let me push you on that for just a second. I heard you in another interview, and they said to you, you know, you've managed to make a business out of writing and talking about what you talk about. And he said, "What was the most challenging thing of starting and getting a business going?" And you immediately replied, like immediately, your reaction was, "Well, the first challenge was to care about people at all."
Yeah.
That hit me like a bag of bricks when you said
Yeah.
that. You're clearly a smart person. And I want to talk about the gifted word in just a second, but you're clearly a smart person. How do you tolerate, I'm not going to say stupid people, but people who do stupid things on the regular? How do you live in a world where you have to tolerate that and care about people in general and get to a place where you're serving at as a high level as you have?
Very complicated question. Or
That's
maybe
kind of my
the
style, Eric. That's kind
yeah,
of my
maybe the
style.
answer is complicated.
Okay.
Let me go in a few different directions. One is the people who come to me, the clients I have are by and large smart. That's who comes to me. So I don't have to deal with the other folks
Yeah.
in session.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. If I had to, I
It is a
wouldn't be
big
able to
deal.
do it. I
It's a
wouldn't
very
be
big
able to
deal.
do it.
Yeah.
Uh, that's A. B, I tune out all conversations in airports and restaurants and what have you. My wife hears what's going on at the next table. I tune it out. I can't. There's a little deafness going on, but it's also a conscious tuning out. I don't want to know these conversations.
What about the
They,
news? What about social media? Do you
I watch no news.
Okay.
I watch zero news.
Okay.
I don't have a cell phone. I do not possess one. I don't have a smartphone. I'm insulated because I have stuff to do. I have work to do. It would be to me an indulgence to care about the news unless I was going to a barricade, unless it was a resistance fighting moment and I was going to a barricade, then I would need to know where the barricade was. Is it on this avenue or that avenue? But short of going on a barricade, just to know that another cruel thing has happened, don't need to know that.
I think that that's hard. And I would love for you to talk me out of my need to know. So I think that one of the characteristics, pushback, obviously, one of the characteristics of a smart person is a need to know, a wanting to learn, wanting to know more.
Well,
And
need to
when
know
you're living
what.
in history, I mean, this is, I don't think we can debate when you're living through history, how can your mind not want to know, like, what the hell are these people doing today? And if not just for interest, self preservation or resistance fighting.
I think one can be really very, whichever thread of philosophy one chooses, but one can be very philosophical about that. You may remember that the ending of Camus' The Plague, which is an allegory about World War II, where
Yeah.
rats eat for Nazis, the last sentence of that novel is something like, the rats always return for the edification of mankind. How can we not know that we know that the rats always return for the edification of mankind. The rats are back. I don't need to know that. Unless there's something to do, I don't know why you would need to know that the rats are back. Unless you were intending to do something with that information.
Don't we have a responsibility? Don't
To
smart
know?
people, I mean, not to know, not necessarily to know, but do you think that smart people have a responsibility to
Sure.
play a bigger role in making sure that this goes in a good way and doesn't just
Of course,
cede power to these
that's
terrible
why all
people?
day long I am fighting psychiatry. And I'm doing good work all day long while not knowing that the cruel people are doing cruel. I don't need to know the news if that costs me my fight against badness over here.
So
I'm busy fighting. I'm busy on my barricades.
you picked your fight, is what I'm hearing.
I'm picking my. That's right. Religion is one of my fights. Psychiatry is one of my fights. Humbug in general would be one of my fights.
Mm,
But anything that comes up that I believe to be anti-humanistic, anti-humane, anti anything that's not okay, I'll fight. But to be engaged in that fight, I can't also be watching the news.
yeah, I get that.
It's what in existential terms would be called engaged, engagé, right? I'm engaged selectively, of course, selectively.
When I invite a guest on this podcast, on the intake form, I ask for some information like, your picture and your bio. And I ask a question about, do you identify with the word giftedness
Yeah.
as it is cited in the research? And you said it's complicated. I'm wondering, how do you think about giftedness in adulthood?
It's not gifted and talented are not words that I either use or like to use. I guess I don't like to use them because they feel a little in need of deconstruction, that multiple ideas are embedded in
Yes.
there. There are ideas from Gardner and multiple intelligences. So
Mm-hmm.
one could be talented in some domain, not be a talented person, but be talented at carpentry or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one complication. There just feel like there are many. So if in order to master something, as that book says, it takes 10,000 hours to do something to
Yeah.
master it. Once I'm now a master at it, was there talent involved, or was it 10,000 hours of work? Was there ever talent exactly? Was that the right frame to be thinking about how I arrived at mastery? Is it
Mm-hmm.
via talent or sweat equity? I don't know. I guess smart. If there's, it feels like I can picture a bell curve with smart. I can picture a normal curve, and I can see smart one standard deviation to the right and very smart two standard deviations to the right. I can picture that, and I can picture 15% over there to the right in the two standard deviations, and then 1.5% or 2% at the far right. That all I can picture, and that makes sense to me. Unitary intelligence, which is an idea that has been deconstructed and debunked, but still, at least metaphorically, rings a bell to me. It still rings a bell.
Mm.
Somebody's smart or not. That holds for me. And talented and gifted, I don't see the bell curve.
Do you find, though, with the people that you see that are creative, smart folks, as you've described them, do they also have experience the negative parts of that, whether it be an urge to perfection,
Sure.
all the things that come with perfectionism, or existential crises, or intensities or overexcitabilities? Do you see those things in them in addition to their creative intelligence?
All of those. Let me just add one that the ones you just named, I think, are obvious enough to not necessarily need elaboration. One that's interesting, I call the smart gap. That's a little less known as an idea. And that's the idea that a person experiences themselves as smart, but not smart enough to get the work they want to get done.
Yes.
Done.
Yes.
And that's very painful, very poignant to me. Let's say you have an IQ of 173, but you need an IQ of 194 to be Newton. That's really tough. I don't mean it's tougher than being a coal miner, but it's just tough. Now, by the way, can one get smarter? There were interesting studies in the 1940s when Roosevelt had money to throw at the WPA,
Hmm.
and many interesting things were done in the 1940s that have never been replicated. And one was about classroom enrichment. And if you had one group of students who didn't get enriched and one group of students who did, and then did pre and post IQ tests, the enriched kids gained 5 or 10 points in IQ, but by virtue of having enrichment activities and what have you. So maybe one could get from 167 to 173. It's still not 194.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about, and I think this issue relates to it. I've heard you talk about things like depression actually is despair. I don't want to put words in
Yeah.
your mouth, but that's
Yes.
what I picked up. And also, I know, how much you think about existentialism, and that these things shouldn't be pathologized.
Yes.
And yet, if I'm feeling blue, I go to my doctor. He's going to refer me to a psychiatrist who's going to give me a pill. What's it going to
Yes.
take? What is it going to take for practitioners, psychologists, MDs, psychiatrists, to have more awareness around what it is to crave meaning and feel despair and want to make something of your life and not freaking pathologize it? What's it going to take to bring
Right,
that to the forefront?
there's no hope that will change, comma.
Mm,
But all of the efforts of the folks in this movement that I'm in has three names: critical psychology, critical psychiatry, and anti-psychiatry. Nobody agrees to what the real name is, and that's okay. But our efforts, Robert Whitaker, who runs Mad in America, which is a wonderful website and has lots of viewers and all of that, that's a great place to learn about critical psychology stuff. There are resources, but not only are there resources, but there are changes happening. Not gigantic. I don't know what level change to call them, but for instance, very recently in the last couple of months. So I have to do a little backstory here. The
Yeah.
American Psychiatric Association produces something called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association.
Yeah.
That's the diagnostic manual for the United States and a lot of the world. The World Health Organization produces a different document, the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases, which most of the non-American world uses, but it's the same model. They both have the same symptom picture basis. Okay.
Yep.
But just a couple of months ago, the World Health Organization came out and said, we no longer quite believe in our own reliance on this model. We're not quite sure that this symptom picture model, and it doesn't work, works. We're not sure it
Mm,
works. And so we're looking at it.
okay.
That's that's something.
It's not nothing.
That's not nothing. And how did who learned what from what, or how did that happen? What's the butterfly effect here? I don't know. But it encourages me.
Yeah.
Not that we can get all the way because big pharma is so big.
Yeah.
Watch something, every 2 out of 3 ads are drug ads.
It's wild.
It's really hard to fight big pharma. Also, the central metaphor is so potent that it's almost impossible to crack. The central metaphor is the analogy between physical disorder and mental disorder. It just sounds right. Well, if there are physical disorders, certainly there must be mental disorders. And that analogy or metaphor overrides the long sentence that I have to tell a very long sentence about why that doesn't work.
Yeah.
I have a slogan. I mean, I have slogans like childhood is not a disease, and I can create slogans, but that physical disorder, mental disorder thing is so linguistically powerful.
Mhm.
I'm not sure anything can crack it.
Well, we need a good PR guy. You mentioned earlier that you have a new book coming out in December. Before we wrap up here, it's called A Brave New Mind. Do you have anything you want to share or preview about what we should look forward to in that book?
Well, this is just maybe just the slightest preview, and that
Sure.
is I've been trying to, as so many of us are, come to grips with, are we equal to this moment? And if we're not, what might help us become more equal to this moment emotionally, mentally, all of that. And so I've tried to create a picture of a mind that might be equal to this moment by marrying two ideas, the idea of serenity and the idea of readiness. And what I'm trying to get at is that some traditional ways of thinking about now, which sounds so promising, like the Zen idea of now, when you peel a potato, just peel a potato,
Yeah.
that idea of being really present,
Yeah.
doesn't actually work any longer, or is actually not appropriate. That we need to both be here tranquilly, calmly, serenely as best we can, but also ready for the next thing and ready in certain ways that, of course, the book goes into describing. So it's a book that tries to explain and describe the phrase serene readiness as a new way to be, a new mental model.
That sounds very fascinating. I can't wait to read that. Um,
Coming to your local bookstore and
Coming to your local bookstore. His name is Dr. Eric Maisel. He is a retired family therapist who specializes in creative and performing artists. He founded the profession of creative coaching, where he actively maintains a thriving creativity coaching practice. He has published more than 50 books. The two that I am recommending that you run out and purchase today are on your screen. They are called Why Smart People Hurt and Redesign Your Mind. You can also learn more about him at ericmazel.com, also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Substack. Dr. Mazel, Eric, I hope that this the first of many conversations that you and I can have. I sincerely appreciate your time and your generosity and insights today.
you're very welcome. And thank you for having me. And yeah, let's do it again.
Absolutely.